All right, I think we have most people on. A few more people are rolling in, but that's all right. Hello everyone, and thank you and welcome to our live class today. We're very excited to have you here and looking forward to an awesome lecture. My name is Anthony and I'll be your host for today. I'm joined on the line by Garric Vosloo, the founder of Functional Medicine Fast Track, who will be conducting most of the presentation today. I will pass it off to him momentarily to kick off the presentation on today's topic, pattern recognition in Organix Comprehensive Test. But before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. I've muted everyone by default. Secondly, if you have any questions during the course of this live class, please submit them in the chat panel. The questions will all come to me as the host, and I will be conducting a live Q&A at the end with our presenter. With that said, I'd like to pass it off to Garric to start the presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate the invite and yeah, love Rupa Health. And I'm super excited to bring this talk to everybody. And pattern recognition in organic comprehensives is a topic that I just love teaching with all the health professionals that we mentor into functional medicine. And when Anthony first asked me to do this, I said, well, yeah, can I have 3 hours? He said, no, you got 30 minutes. So I'm going to just condense it. Apologize for my accent. I may have to speed up a little bit and just get through all of this, but it's going to be a ton of fun. And I'm going to go through 5 patterns here, but we're going to go through some basics first. You see my screen's not working here. Anthony, we got drawings all on the screen here, so I've like lost control of the screen.
No problem, Garric. We have some technical issues once in a while here, not an issue. Let's take a look. Are you able to use just the forward and back buttons for your presentation?
No, they're not working at all.
Okay, let's take a look here. Give us just a moment, everybody. Thank you for your patience. While Garric is able to just...
Super weird. Let me stop sharing and then just go out and see.
Okay, let's take a look here.
So let's try that again. Okay, there we go. So who knows why that froze up. So all good there, Anthony? Can I continue?
Perfect. Please continue. Thanks so much, Garric.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so let's go through some basics first. And organic acid testing certainly has become very popular amongst functional medicine practitioners, and that's probably exactly why we're here today. And yeah, I mean, urine-based test, it's just a massive wealth of information about functioning of various bodily systems and can be used to identify possible nutrient deficiencies, gut dysbiosis, and more. Now I'm frozen up again.
I can pull up the presentation if you're having some technical issues here, Garric. Not a problem.
It's super weird. Why is that stopping me moving forward here?
Thank you, everybody, for your patience. Just give us just a moment here. We'll keep this going.
Let me try it like this. Okay. Okay, so let's move forward there and see if that doesn't give us any more technical issues. So first of all, what is an organic acid? Organic acids are basically byproducts or intermediates of chemical reactions that occur within the body. The quantity and sometimes the type of organic acids produced are unique to each individual. That's great, and can be influenced by a variety of factors. Some factors that can influence organic acid production within the body include diet, environmental toxins, gut microbes, genetics, kidney, liver function, medications, nutrient status, oxidative stress, and more. So what exactly is an organic acid? In order for our bodies to run effectively, it needs proper amount of vitamins and minerals to act as cofactors for enzymes. Enzymes are basically running our body through metabolic processes. Now, without enough of those cofactors and some genetic mutations, these chemical pathways are unable to proceed at their normal pace. So as a result, organic acids begin to build up and then they're excreted into the urine, and we can get those results from there. So if we've just got to simplify it down, if you have metabolite A, it's going to move to metabolite B. You're going to need an enzyme there, and that enzyme is going to need cofactors, and that pathway can continue. However, when those enzymes do not have cofactors or there's something else blocking it, then it's going to move to an alternative intermediate, and that will be then excreted, and we're going to be able to see that in the organic acid test coming from the urine. So some reasons for abnormal OAT results is when the body's not functioning optimally, those organic acids in the urine can become elevated or depleted depending on what's occurring. And that's what we're going to be going through in this pattern recognition. So some of the main reasons for abnormal urinary organic acids may include inborn errors of metabolism, B vitamin deficiencies is a big one, gut dysbiosis, impaired fatty acid metabolism, ketosis or carbohydrate metabolism, neurotransmitter metabolism, mitochondrial dysfunction, oxidative stress, poor detox, and inflammation. We're not going to be covering all of those, but just so you've got a broad understanding of the possibilities of what can disrupt it. So we're going to be going through 5 examples of pattern recognitions in this specific test called Organix Comprehensive. And there's a good reason that I love teaching from the Organix Comprehensive is it's a report that has that ability for us to understand it very much easier than a lot of the other organics. Organics or organic acid tests are probably the most overwhelming test for functional medicine practitioners. So how can we now bring this into a simplified teaching format that we can start to understand it and connect the dots? So we're going to be looking at low patterns. We're going to be looking at high patterns. We're going to be looking at a glutathione status pattern. Then we're going to look at the kynurenine patterns. And then finally, the lipogenesis patterns. So what I also want you to start to get in your mind as integrative functional medicine practitioners is this is not the only test that is going to validate our thinking. We need confirmatory tests as well. And those can come at the same time, or it may come down the line. So organic acids, I love to kind of validate that with amino acid profile, with nutrient and toxic elements, with stool analysis, and genetic SNPs. So bear that in mind. And the first case study or example that I'm going to go through, I'm going to show you how we connect organic acids to those various tests. So it makes sense and it validates our thinking. So let's have a look at low markers first. This is patient A, 24-year-old female. Main concerns, weight gain, chronic fatigue, brain fog, IBS, and acne. So if you have a look at the first part of the Organix Comprehensive here, which is going to be made up of fatty acid metabolism, carbohydrate metabolism, and then the citric acid cycle, you're going to see a general low pattern there, particularly in the fatty acid metabolism and in the citric acid cycle. The majority are in the 25th percentile or below. That immediately should bring up a red flag for us to start thinking about substrate issues. And substrate here, I'm going to be talking about amino acids. Amino acids are going to be our building block for all our metabolic pathways. So when we see this general trend, that needs to be the red flag that pops up. So this is a graphic just to show you how important amino acids are through that entire cycle. And they're going to be interjected through the citric acid cycle, as well as from pyruvic acid through pyruvic dehydrogenase. So one question that often pops up if you're thinking like a functional medicine practitioner is, well, how does fatty metabolism actually correlate to low amino acids? How does that make sense? So this is what I'm going to go through here for those that are just thinking on that level. Okay, we got stuck again.
Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us. We're just having some technical.
Reshare and see if it just starts again. 1 sec. Nothing like technical issues, huh? Okay, there we're back and running. You'll have to do some editing at the end, Anthony. So low ethyl melanate, one of the markers in the fatty acid metabolism, is not directly associated with the other two, adipate and suberate, with mitochondrial restricted states. Okay, so this may be a little bit technical, but just bear with me. So rather within pathways of amino acid catabolism. So it is quite common to find ethyl melanate low along with low adipate and suberate. And the linking factor is cellular free amino acid concentrations that are directly correlated with both amino acid catabolic flux and mitochondrial genesis by the mTOR activation. So that's how that works, if that is something that you were thinking about there. Oh my goodness. This has just got stuck again, yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's have a look now at the next part, low amino acid patterns in organic acids with the same patient. This is very interesting because when we look at the B complex vitamin markers, so this is the next section of organic acids.
Hey,
we're going to...
We'll need you to share your screen, sorry. Looks like we...
Oh, did it lose it there?
Yeah, if you can, no problem.
Nothing like having a bit of fun here. Huh? Okay, let's share again.
Looks good.
Okay, so here we can see non-detectable DLs of 15, 16, and 17, keto isovalerate, keto isocaparate, keto beta methylvalerate. These are intermediates in the branch chain amino acids. So our thinking needs to be, when they come up, all three of them non-detectable, we need to think, well, why are they non-detectable? And is this now a connection to the low amino acid patterns that we've seen up above? And this you don't commonly see, but when you do see this, this is, okay, there's something happening here. And then we need to be thinking back to why are the amino acid issues? So just going to the branch chain amino acids, this is the pathway that they would go down. And those are the three intermediates that you can see that we are measuring there. And those are going to be super low. And it's really saying, well, leucine, isoleucine, and valine are probably not available to metabolize. There are other patterns that we can pick up, and sometimes these are in isolation, but when they are low, we may also want to associate them with those low B vitamin markers, and again with the low fatty metabolism trend and the citric acid low trend. And this is not a perfect example, but homovanillate, when that is low, it starts to trigger my mind. Is there a low tryptophan, phenylalanine? When vanilmandelate and homovanillate are low, that for sure is an amino acid issue there. And that is your dopamine and your epinephrine. So dopamine should be moving to epinephrine. Here there is a bit of a movement. So that is just telling us. Another one is picolinate. When that is on the low side, again, we need to think that kynurenine pathway may be depleted from tryptophan, and we got to connect the dots again up above. Same with if we've got super high oxidative stress, say on hydroxyphenyl lactate, but we've got a super low hydroxy-2-deguanosine below 25th percentile, that may be a little trigger again to say, possibly there may be a amino acid issue here. So we've got to take these isolated points here and then see what are the other connections. So I ran the amino acid profile for this patient A, and here we can just validate exactly our thinking process. So here we can see a complete trend of low on the essential amino acids on both pages here. So now we want to dig a little bit deeper and go, okay, well, why is she not absorbing? So let's run a CSAP and have a look there. What is the trend? What's the pattern? And again, this pattern is going to show us there's a clear dysbiosis. We have moderate yeast coming up on microscope. And then we've got elastase that is subpar. We should have this above 500. So that's also got to start to think, okay, pancreatic function not great. Is there possible stomach acidity issues? Our reflex from that strong acidic chyme coming through the small intestine may not be really motivating the pancreas to secrete. Do we need to address that? And then we can see secretory IgA here, super low, 9.9. So anything in single digits here is definitely a red flag for me. So we've definitely got gut issues, and that's going to then correlate to that low amino acids, and that's reflecting into the organic acids. So what would be the simple clinical application here? Well, let's start with some essential amino acids, free-form amino acids that don't need any breakdown. They can get into the blood. They can get to the cellular level as quickly as possible and start to do their work. In the meantime, we need to be addressing maldigestion, malabsorption. What are the gut issues that we need to be dealing with? We're not going to go into that. Do we possibly need to do a betaine hydrochloride test to check for optimal stomach acidity? Do we need to add digestive enzymes to aid the low pancreatic function? And that may be the starting point of the clinical application for what we saw with that pattern of low amino acids because of the low trend. Let's go on to pattern number 2 now, dominant high markers. So we're taking a different patient now, patient B, 57-year-old male, has depression, anxiety, brain fog, memory issues. Here's the MSQ. We can see a dominance, again, just nice to kind of see the connections of digestive tract of 10 and mind and emotions gathering to 21 in total there. So 31 score out of 71 just between digestive tract and then brain. So no wonder depression, anxiety, brain fog, memory issues are kicking in, but that is our gut-brain axis. So let's have a look here. Here we have a general trend, and I've seen a lot worse, but this patient's definitely got a general trend on the high side. So when we have that high side, what are our thinking processes here? Our thinking process needs to start first with reason number 1 possibility is going to be cofactors. Cofactors can be vitamins B, 1, 2, 3, 5, can be magnesium, can be iron, can be manganese, can be lipoic acid. So that is our first thinking process. Why are there no cofactors? What are we going to do to address? Again, more than likely coming back down to the gut. Reason number 2 can be inhibition of the receptor sites of those enzymes. And again, there can be many reasons for inhibition, but a lot of the time we need to be looking at heavy metal. We can be looking at medications and other things as well, but I'm just digging into the heavy metals here. And we need to be thinking fluoride, arsenic, mercury, lead, aluminium, antimony. Those are going to be our common ones that are blocking several pathways through the citric acid cycle. And when we get that dominant high pattern, that is our thinking process. Now, our third possible reason is going to be individual genetic SNPs within those enzymes. And this is always a tricky one because within a pattern, we may have a combination of all 3 of these reasons. as we start to correct these imbalances of cofactors, possibly remove heavy metals, and we get a correction of a trend, we may have isolated high point data points. And those may be then giving us the indication of the genetic SNPs. So understand that the genetic SNPs may at the moment in a high trend be covered up. So let's move further along with that same patient B. And now we're moving again to the B complexes, completely opposite to our patient A. And we've got this trend of high, all in the 5th percentile. So our B vitamins, now we have excess of all these keto acids. We have excess of xantharinate, hydroxyisovalerate, which is our biotin marker, methylmelanate, and fig glue, which is our methylation, B12, and folic acid. So we've really got this whole range of cofactors that are coming up as insufficient. So great, great connection. And again, just highlighting from our branch chain fatty acids here, when these intermediates accumulate, they cannot move forward because they do not have those cofactors to move to the end products of acetyl-CoA, succinyl, propanol, and so on, to be used in the Krebs cycle. So what is the clinical application there? Well, we're going to need to get B vitamins into the system. Whether we do that immediately or not, that is a more complex decision, because possibly if they have SIBO, we may need to delay that, address gut issues before that time. If there aren't signs of SIBO, we may be able to address bringing B vitamins in a whole lot sooner. Ultimately, we want to be optimizing gut health so we get better absorption of all those cofactors. Using a 5R program, we're going to need some multiminerals and possibly additional magnesium and iron. So those are our clinical applications. And I'm really oversimplifying it here just with the data that we have. So let's go on to pattern recognition number 3. I love this one because there's many different elements that we can connect, and we can bring genetics into this as well. But I'm going to simplify it down just to the organics. And this pathway is important. So first thing we want to look at, there's 3 markers that we're going to look at in this pattern, is alpha hydroxybutyrate. So understanding where this fits in to the glutathione status is it is part of glutathione synthesis. That's important to understand. Now, pyroglutamate is part of glutathione recovery. So that is really at the kidney level when glutathione's been broken down into its 3 amino acids. Pyroglutamate may be lost into the urine, and then we've got poor recovery for recirculation and rebuilding of glutathione because that glutamate's been lost. So that's super high. That is not a good sign. Then we're going to be looking at sulfate. So sulfate in the urine is a sign of turnover through sulfoxidation pathways through the use of taurine, cysteine, and methionine to build up glutathione. So these 3 markers are going to be key. Now, there's a little algorithm that we can go through to have a look at how these work. So let's look at alpha hydroxybutyrate first. And you're going to see on the left-hand side here that we have early, middle, and late stages of glutathione capacity erosion. So alpha hydroxybutyrate, generally when it's on the high end, that's going to be early and mid-phase capacity erosion of glutathione. When it is non-detectable, that's big red flag. That's late stage, and that patient is in dire need of support because they're under oxidative burden. Now, we do need to also look at pyroglutamate, and this can vary. So although this algorithm tells us it can be variable, then it goes high and then to the low status in the late phase of glutathione depletion, I have seen this kind of vary. Sulfate, generally with the late phase, is going to be on that low end. And again, we may be working through a paradigm. So you're going to get super late end people, and you're going to get almost like mid to late end, where that sulfate is now dropping and maybe at the 25th percentile, maybe even the 50th percentile. Whereas if you looked at it a month or 2 ago, that might have been at 75th percentile. So it's slowly just depleting through the glutathione turnover through sulfoxidation of those 3 amino acids. And then we will look to connect and really confirm. So this is almost a validation, is what is happening on the oxidative stress side. And we'll look at 8-hydroxydeguanosine. So our DNA damage marker, when this starts to lift to that high side, we're moving towards the mid and late stages of a glutathione depletion. And that makes sense. Glutathione being our strongest antioxidant, and then we're getting excessive oxidation. Well, there is a clear imbalance. If you want to do plasma confirmatory testing, you can do some amino acids and just have a look at those basic building blocks. And certainly those are low, along with all these other markers being non-detectable and low. That is going to be a severe glutathione capacity erosion. So let's have a look at some examples. Here we have patient B that we're bringing through again, so our 57-year-old male with depression. And a lot of these patients, when they've got these higher MSQs, we're going to expect some kind of oxidative inflammatory burden. So, you know, I very seldom see all alpha-hydroxybutyrate pyroglutamate sulfate in the 50th, 75th percentile, where we'd like them to be. They're going to be all skewed out. So this pattern now, where we look at these three, are going to be at the mid-stage range. So we've got a high alpha-hydroxybutyrate, number 33. We've got a 75th percentile pyroglutamate. We've got a high sulfate. So there's clear distress. And this is then confirmed with the high oxidative damage markers. And both we can see hydroxyphenolactate and 8-hydroxy-2-deguanosine. So confirmation that we need to be doing something here pretty rapidly. Let's have a look at end-stage glutathione depletion. And here you're going to see, first of all, you've got the non-detectable alpha-hydroxybutyrate. So that is first our big red flag for our end stage, but then we confirmed with low pyroglutamate, low sulfate. And like I was saying earlier, sometimes these can be a little bit different. You may have pyroglutamate at the 50th percentile and sulfate at the 50th percentile. And that's the shift in the paradigm of slowly everything's being not recovered and the turnover is being exceeded. So just keep that in mind. Again, we'll correlate this with oxidative stress markers, and we're going to have the high oxidative 8-hydroxy-2-deguanosine and the hydroxyphenolactate. So confirmatory tests, there's many confirmatory tests here, but your basic ones that you can do are certainly some low amino acids, specifically of methionine, taurine, and cysteine. You can look at your precursor amino acids such as glycine and serine, and then look at your oxidative stress and have a look if they are high. So we were looking at the 8-hydroxy-deguanosine, but you can also look at your lipid peroxidase. So let's dig into a little bit of what's called hypometabolic compensatory states. So this is a pattern as well. And here's a great definition. The definition is, it's broadly defined as hormonal secretions and cytokine responses that act to slow or reverse deviations from median or normal physiological states. In other words, it's slowing our metabolic processes for you to survive and live. And the body is very clever in this way. So this example I'm going to go through now is, I just love this glutathione magnesium dyade. And this is a powerful and real pattern for us to keep checking our glutathione status when we know that they have a low magnesium. And the reason for that is the assimilation of magnesium produces immediate stimulation of mitochondrial reactive oxygen species. And that happens in the electron transport chain. So therefore, magnesium is resisted to offset the oxidative stress produced by the Krebs cycle because glutathione is inadequate. So we'll dig into that. I hope everybody understood that. Here is a study just showing that RBC and glutathione have a direct correlation. So as glutathione lifts, magnesium has that ability to lift as well. And the body just has this incredible intuitive way to say, I'm not going to take in magnesium. Even if it's there, if I take it in, I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to be putting a further burden, increase the oxidative stress. So that is a really, really simple way just to measure if you do find this correlation with patients is RBC magnesium. You just keep checking that. As that's going up, you're probably going to find 8-hydroxydeguanosine coming down and your glutathione going up. So a great test here in Rupa Health would be nutrient elements, and you can just check your magnesium here with a blood spot. Here is our Krebs cycle, and I want to highlight the electron transport chain. So as our Krebs cycle is working and we're getting all our NDHs, all our hydrogens into the electron transport chain, you'll see those orange icons at the bottom here are our oxidative stress. And ideally, we should have glutathione and, of course, superoxidase dismutase. So that's another great check for us to look genetically to see if we have any SNPs on the superoxidase dismutase level. Because if we've got now our glutathione status pattern that is corroded, and we've got a superoxidase dismutase SNP, then they are completely compromised. And ideally, we don't want to see that rise in lipid peroxidase and the 8-hydroxydeguanosines. So what is our clinical application for glutathione depletion with low magnesium? Well, we can use our precursors, NAC, 600 milligrams to 1200 milligrams, use glutathione as needed. So whether it's a cream, whether it's S-acetyl glutathione tablets, we've just got to get them into those patients. Usually we see with those excessive depletions, if you're still addressing underlying root causes, we need to do really high doses of these two for 4 to 6 weeks, just to get them into the playing field that we can start to see all our other therapies starting to take a hold and starting to get a grip. So whether we're addressing gut dysbiosis or whatever it may be. Clearly, we need to do some methylation support so that we're not just plugging in glutathione and NAC, we're actually starting to support the whole methylation process. And then we can start to add in some magnesium glycinate and again, amino acids as a precursor. So again, this is super simplified, but this would be the direct clinical application when we do see this depletion pattern. So let's move then to pattern recognition number 4, Conurate and xantharinate, and we'll go through a couple of key things here. So here, first of all, we're going to just look at that pathway. So we can see tryptophan starting this pathway. It is then going to move to kynurenine, and it should go down this pathway, ideally not being deficient in B6, otherwise we're going to get a rise in xantharinate. As it moves down that pathway, it would increase in quinolinic acid and picolinic acid. Now, again, we don't want excesses of either of these, any of these, because they're all neuroinflammatory metabolites. And they are a sign of increased immune activation. So, you know, everything in balance, but again, we don't want to be facilitating this pathway. We would rather have tryptophan going down a serotonin pathway. So let's look at the patterns here. And what we're going to first look at is a high xantharinate and a high kynurenate. So this is going to be a clear vitamin B6 deficiency. And then you can look at high xantharinate and not a high kynurenate. So that again is going to be a milder form of B6 deficiency. But when we flip this around, where we don't have a high xantharinate, but we have a high kynurate and quinolate, that is immune activation and an increase in interferon gamma. So that is the pattern sequence that we need to be looking at, because it's going to guide us in a direction to correct this inflammatory process stimulated from the gut, which has a direct influence on the brain. So having a look at patient C here we have 58-year-old female, has weight gain, fatigue, lethargy, apathy, anxiety, MSQ 79. We're going to follow this patient through with the next pattern as well. So here you'll see a high xantharinate and we got the high kynurenate. So that is immediate. We've got a B6 deficiency. Again, thinking back to why we have that B6 deficiency, we more than likely go back, address the gut, but we may need to start with supplementing some B6. Here is a different pattern. You'll see a very low xantharinate here, and then you're going to see kynurenate, quinolate, and picolinate over the top. So this again is now telling us, okay, we've got immune activation, interferon gamma, pushing that process forward, and pattern recognition that we have picked up with this situation. Let's move on to pattern recognition number 5. This is very interesting, is the correlation between BMI and the lipogenesis associated with hipporate. So lipogenesis on the whole is this metabolic process through which acetyl-CoA, that is our substrate for the Krebs cycle, is rather converted to triglycerides for fat rather than going through the Krebs cycle. So triglycerides in fat are packed within the cytoplasmic lipid droplets. The process begins with acetyl-CoA, which is an organic compound used to transfer energy from metabolism of carbohydrates, fatty acids, and ethanol. So I'm sure a lot of you understand that. So this is what's called a hypometabolic beneficial response because it is related to BMI. The rate of lipogenesis falls when mitochondrial coenzyme A is diverted to hipporate formation from benzoate. So the available coenzyme A in a given cell determines rates of metabolic activity. Surges in a given pathway tend to soak up available CoA, causing transient slowing of multiple other CoA-dependent processes. Does that make sense? So in other words, coenzyme A should be moving into the Krebs cycle. However, if we have a high benzoate, which is from polyphenols that we're ingesting, the polyphenol bacteria in the gut, then produce the benzoate then is shunted to hipporate and requires a coenzyme A through that process. So it sucks up all of the coenzyme A from the citric acid cycle, which is a hypometabolic state. But what it's doing is it's taking that coenzyme A away from moving towards a triglyceride. So benzoate is the only one identified to date that can deplete available mitochondrial coenzyme A to such an extent that slowing is demonstrable in the flux of energetic substrates and lipogenesis. Interrupted lipogenesis leads to slower rates of adipose fat deposition and lower BMI. So everybody's celebrating who wants to lose weight, like how can I get my benzoate up and hipporate flushing. In other words, people with sufficient intake of dietary polyphenols to produce postprandial surges of benzoate have lower BMI than those with low urinary benzoate and hipporate. So that is a lot, but I hope you understand the physiology there, because this is a great way, if you haven't seen your patient, say if you're doing virtual online and you don't know their BMI, to pick this up and then go, I'm predicting what your BMI is. So the principal metabolite pattern in people with higher BMI include so this is the opposite, low hipporate, citrate, succinate, in addition to other compounds. It's not conclusive. So that's an example of a beneficial hypometabolic state transiently produced during postprandial intervals in healthy individuals. So you've got to understand this is in healthy individuals. So let's have a look. Now we bring in patient A back and we're having a look here. So this one is a 24-year-old who has had a lot of weight gain. Her BMI has lifted. What do we see? A low citrate, a low succinate, a low benzoate and hipporate. Those are the opposite signs of the low BMI. We're going to look for those that now, let's take another pattern, another example of the opposite end, where we now are looking at patient D. This is an ex-pro cyclist, a BMI of 21, just complaining to me, patient of mine, of seasonal allergies. How can you get rid of my seasonal allergies that I can just train properly when they're coming on? I don't want to be disrupted. Okay, but 71 kilos, so 150 odd pounds, 6'2", and the BMI is really, really good. However, when we're running this, the organics, we're seeing the correlation here of the benzoate and the hipporate on the high end. So we're getting this rapid sucking of all the coenzyme A, and shunting of the benzoate hippurate. I think there's still a little bit of dysbiosis that we've got to clear up here anyway. We see this with all our professional athletes that we do work with. So this is another age group cyclist, a 63-year-old with a BMI of 22, that here we can see a low benzoate and a high hippurate. So this is a proper shunting of benzoate to hippurate. And again, we're going to get that depletion of coenzyme A and that reduction in triglyceride formation, and hence the low BMI. So this is just kind of quoting a research paper and showing that Jeremy Nicholson and co-workers prior to the landmark metabolic study revealing that human BMI is inversely related to urinary hippurate. So I think that's a pretty cool pattern, and it's nice just to kind of pick that up and to validate that. So let's do a recap here as we kind of just end off. And when you are seeing low patterns, think in your head amino acids, substrates. What is the root cause then of those amino acids being low? You more than likely need to go back down to gut and see what is happening there. When we have high patterns, we're going to be thinking of depleted cofactors, possible inhibitors like heavy metals, medications, or genetic SNPs within each of those enzymes. So those are the key thinking points with the high patterns. When it comes to glutathione status patterns, we need to be thinking of NAC, glutathione, amino acids, magnesium. Conurate patterns, thinking about, do we need to go head towards B6 support, or do we need to now support the immune system and see what is now spurring that immune activation? And then lipogenesis patterns, we need to be thinking of the microbiome and polyphenols, and how do we rebalance that microbiome and start to improve our polyphenol ingestion and the bacteria that feed off of it. So thank you. I think we got through that pretty rapidly. Sorry for all the interruptions in the beginning.
Thank you so much, Garric. That was amazing. Super informative, and you gave some really nice clinical pearls for our viewers today. So we have some questions if you'd like to jump into the Q&A. So let's go over the first one. When is the best to use organic acids?
When is it best to use organic acids? Great question. And organic acids is, I would say, my staple. So along with a stool analysis test, organic acids is going to be my staple for all patients that I start with. So I'm starting with that as my first test, along with basic blood work, to know exactly how am I going to personalize this plan. It's not something, because it gives us so much data, I feel like I cannot do without it. So that's a great question.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Moving on to question number 2. How do you know when to use a confirmatory test for the organics?
Yeah, another great question there. And it really depends on your patient. So if your patient is, okay, you know, I need to do whatever test I need to do, you're going to be running your amino acids, your fatty acids as well, do your stool analysis alongside genetics with your organic acids, because those are the ideal confirmatory tests to be able to now link back to your organic acids and to confirm. Because remember, organic acids is pretty good, but it's not going to be conclusive. We want to look for more validation. So those would be the key. Now, if you're at a point where the patient says, well, you know, I'm on a tight budget, then you want to be deciding, once you get that organic acids, which pattern is moving you towards validating the next confirmatory test. And that'll be deciding on those specific patterns that come up. And then you can say, okay, this is what we have found. Now I suggest we move along and confirm this by doing the next test.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Okay, moving on to the next question. How much do you explain to your patient about what you find in an organics test? I know a lot of patients like to get education on these.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think you've got to customize it with each patient. You know, you've got some patients that just get me better, tell me what to do. And the others like, tell me everything. So I think you have to dovetail and work with each patient what their need is. And I think that's where your skill as a health professional comes in, is kind of feeling that through and seeing how much they want to be educated. Because I fundamentally believe in functional medicine, the more we educate our patients, the more compliant they're going to be. So the more they want to learn about their test, I'm happy to tell them as much as they want. And I want to do it in a layman's way so they understand it. So I think that's a really, really great question. We need to customize that all the time, but make sure that we're not doing the opposite, that we're bombarding them with a ton of information when they are actually going, no, I don't need that.
Thank you for that. Next question is, how often would you retest Organix Comprehensive test? I think this is in contrast to the how to know when to use the confirmatory test.
Yeah, great one. So, and I think organic acid is a great one to retest just because we've got so many data points. It is more the $200 to $300 mark. So you've got to decide again just on the budget of the patient, but I like to do it every 6 months initially. And then once my patient's in maintenance phase, they're feeling much better, the MSQ's down, then we'll do it annually. So initially I may do it every 6 months until we know exactly what's on track. And then we will do it annually to just retrospectively see how we're doing.
Perfect. Thank you. So we got a lot of questions here today, and we'll make sure to, if we didn't touch on your question specifically, we'll get with you after the live class today, but we have time for one more. And that is, what do you think about using the metabolomics test instead of the Organix Comprehensive test?
Yeah, I think metabolomics, I'm just so pleased that they brought that out because I think it's an absolutely amazing test. And first of all, to understand what metabolomics is. So metabolomics is actually taken Organix Comprehensive and put it into that alongside other data, including the amino acids. So I think it's been very, very useful to have that test because it's really taken the economics down so that we can do those tests with more patients. So there's actually more data points in metabolomics organics than the Organix Comprehensive. And I think that would be almost going to be the test of choice for most health professionals moving forward, is using the metabolomics with the add-ons, because you can do a fatty acid profile and you can do urine elements and toxic elements as an add-on for, I think, $30 each on top of the metabolomics. So I really think that is going to be a classy test to do to get a ton of information, you know, with one test for a really good rate.
Amazing. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for attending the live class today. Big shout out to Functional Medicine Fast Track and Garric today, who did a fantastic job. We hope to see you on the next one.